people ask us, how does TWRA fight CWD? Somebody want to jump in and kind of answer that for the folks who asked that question? How are we fighting the spread?
Well, I guess I'll jump back in.
Jeremy, you're on the hot mic.
Yeah, we're gonna let you do it. The CWD coordinator has to answer all the questions.
First is through just sampling, just getting the information. So obviously we rely on hunters primarily for sample collection.
The award-winning Tennessee WildCast is on the air with the latest on hunting, fishing, boating, wildlife watching, and all things outdoors. Make welcome your host, drummer and outdoor expert novice, Jason Harmon.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this edition of Tennessee WildCast. We're glad you're tuning in. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. We got a great show lined up for you today. It's going to be a little bit of CWD, a little CWD update. It's been a while since we've had some folks around the table here to talk about CWD. So anyway, we're here with Dan Grove. He is our TWRA vet as well as a UT Extension assistant professor. Kind of filling in for Don today. We'll call you the co-host.
Works for me.
Don's on special assignment today, so we got somebody standing in. And then we have Jeremy Dennison. He's our CWD field coordinator. And then Garrett Clevenger, deer coordinator, which is new to the agency, and we'll get more into that later maybe. Glad you guys are here. Appreciate you joining us. We're going to dive into all this fun stuff. We're going to talk hunting regulations, CWD zones, how the TWRA is fighting CWD or trying to fight CWD. We're going to talk about labs, results, all that fun stuff today to get you guys up to date. I appreciate y'all jumping in.
Glad to be here.
Thanks for having me.
Same. All right. So we'll start with regulations. The hunting guide just came out not too long ago, and people are reviewing that, and they're flipping through the book, and they're seeing all these changes. Not too many changes, but a few changes in the hunting regulations. And so let's jump in, and I'm going to pull it up on the screen, Todd, if you want to show it to folks who are watching, and be a good place to start. So we're going to talk about CWD today and the units. But as far as Unit CWD, we've had a few questions come in. Mm-hmm. A few counties that were positive, have been positive, and some that are now considered high risk, but they don't fall under the CWD unit. So, well, one of you guys, maybe Jeremy, he's kind of shaking his head. I think he's got his mind around that. Will you fill people in on why that happened and what the changes happened there?
Yeah, I think it's for multiple reasons. One of which is just the goals of deer management based on CWD prevalence are different for these counties that are in Unit CWD versus some of the newly detected counties. We're not to the point to where we feel like some of those more aggressive measures are really warranted at this point. Now we're collecting more information. That way we can make a more informed decision later on. But as of right now, there's been no changes to the hunting units, Unit L or Unit CWD since last year. Okay, and remind folks, and I can click over to the other tab, but we'll remind folks which counties changed. So just recently, Dyer County changed, right? And that's the one that kind of brought up some questions. Sure, Dyer County. We received a positive test result from Dyer County is within 10 miles of Lake and Obion County, which by our procedure that changes the county designation to high risk in Lake and Obion. Mm-hmm. We had Hardin County as well, which was within 10 miles of Decatur County. So now Hardin is positive, Decatur's high risk, and then of course we have Wayne County over in Region 2 that is high risk as well.
Yeah, because of Alabama positive, right?
Correct.
Yeah. There were multiple positives down in Alabama that kind of led to that change in Wayne County.
So they're within that. Is it 10 miles? 10 mile radius? Yeah. So all right. So that kind of clears that up. So just when you're flipping through the guide or when you're on our website, CWDintennessee.com, make sure you look through that and read through it. Seasons are set by our commission, and the commission didn't make changes, or it's not an automatic change when a county becomes positive. Right. They don't automatically go into that CWD unit. So those CWD regulations don't always apply, correct?
Right. The transportation rules and the feeding restrictions, that's the two things that are automatic. And that's based on rule, and that's for any positive and high-risk county. Those two things automatically take place. So that is a little source of confusion for a lot of people. So
Gotcha.
the maps, the transportation map that's on the website, that is correct. The hunting unit map that's on the website is correct. So.
Right. Yeah, because as things change, the guide may go out of date after it's been printed, but we always keep our website up to date so it follows all the current changes. And we've got the site pulled up there. If Todd's on it, I don't know, but if you're watching, you can see the positive, the high risk, and the areas outside of Unit CWD, and you can go to that website and see what's approved, what's not approved, and the movement of parts and carcasses and that sort of thing when you harvest a deer. Anything else on the regulations and the movement that we want to make sure is covered?
Well, if you want to talk about the changes to hunting regs and Unit CWD,
sure, I think that's good.
Year.
Yeah, let's hear about that.
Within Unit CWD, the antler bag limit was increased to 3, so that hunters can kill 3 bucks antler deer within Unit CWD. The season was also extended through January 31st. To allow more opportunity for deer harvest later in the year. The third change was to the Earn a Buck program. Previously, you had to harvest and submit 2 antlerless deer to earn additional buck tags. Now that's just one antlerless, 1 doe gets you an additional buck. So.
Okay, awesome. And we'll touch more on those incentive programs as we move on through this show. Perfect. All right. So we've covered that. Now, people ask us, how does TWRA fight CWD? Somebody want to jump in and kind of answer that for the folks who asked that question. How are we fighting the spread?
Well, I guess I'll jump back in.
Jeremy, you're on the hot mic.
Yeah, we're gonna let you do it. The CWD coordinator has to answer all the questions.
First is through just sampling, just getting the information. So obviously we rely on hunters primarily for sample collection, either submitting if they process their own deer, they submit their sample one way. If they take their deer to a processor or a taxidermist and they want to have it sampled, we have the mechanism for that. So we have that network in place to provide the opportunity for as many people who want to get their deer tested, and we use that. It's important information for us for management. So,
and one of the other ways, obviously, we just talked about hunting regulations, is to basically make it encourage people to hunt more. Given that we have CWD over such a large area at this point in time. To be effective at managing a disease at that level, it really requires a lot of participation from the hunting public. And so the regulations are actually geared at making it easier to harvest animals and actually are geared at harvesting those types of animals that are more likely to spread the disease. So that's why we increase opportunities for harvesting bucks and things like that. But we also need the additional information from does, and so that's kind of why that incentive program, the Earn a Buck program, kind of exists, because we don't want to just focus on sampling bucks. We want to actually sample everything, antlered or non-antlered. And the other ways too, obviously, we've got some after-season programs that are available for landowners, and those programs enable landowners to continue to harvest animals after the season through a disease management permit. There still are depredation permits for folks that are having crop depredation issues that are available after season. And one of the other ways, too, is we do target removals in conjunction with USDA Wildlife Services and focal points in the periphery where we can actually get at the disease when it's at a really low prevalence and have more of an impact at being able to stop the spread in the periphery, as well as keeping those the prevalence numbers down. So it's an all-encompassing program that relies heavily on hunter support, landowner support, because we don't do any target removals without permission.
Right.
So we need landowner support for that. A lot of people probably don't realize 98% of the land that's out in West Tennessee is privately owned. And so, without the private landowners and without hunter cooperation, our programs wouldn't work.
Yeah, they play a big part. I know that's said a lot around here. It's couldn't do it without those hunters out there and those private landowners helping in those other additional ways. So, yes, that's awesome. Dan, I think we'll keep on track with you, you work a lot with our labs and different things. Tell us about the testing. Once a deer is harvested, maybe we'll even go back a little bit further. Once you harvest a deer, how do we get that sample for folks that are new to Tennessee or haven't heard this spiel before? How do you get a sample to us or the deer to us to be sampled, tested?
Yeah. So again, look at our website. We continuously update the list of partners that we work with, processors, taxidermists. We also have a network of sample drop-off freezers that people can use. You basically first make sure that all your information is correct in your account, like your email address, so we can contact you.
GoOutdoorsTennessee.com.
Make sure that's updated. And basically, if you leave your harvest information with your sample, the only way we have to ensure that we get you that result is that all that information is correct. So the confirmation numbers and name and phone number, please make sure to make sure all that's correct. And basically we make weekly, at least weekly rounds to all these different locations. In Region 1, it's about 95 different stops that we make.
Wow.
And that's usually done 2 to 3 times a week by the CWD field crew. They keep the roads incredibly hot during deer season. So we're constantly getting samples in, getting them processed, getting the data collected, and getting them out to the labs.
So tell us a little about the labs there, Dan.
Yeah, well, one thing I want to add on before we talk about the labs is statewide we actually are doing surveillance. And so in our regions, what we call Region 2, 3, and 4, so basically middle and in East Tennessee areas, every county's got some level of surveillance that's going on. Primarily in the other parts of the state, it's on opening day of muzzleloader and opening day of rifle season.
Those are the biggest days. A lot of deer being killed. Yeah.
Exactly, and so we've trying more bang for our buck, no pun intended, to get out there. And so we work with either a taxidermist or processors on those days, or have separate check stations set up on those days. So if you're hunting in those other areas, there is surveillance that's going on, and there are mechanisms for you to be able to get your animals tested. And with Wayne County being in Region 2, there's actually more of a focus, and we're going to have a bunch of freezer locations available. And those are basically self-service drop-off points, as well as out in Region 1. So at this point in time, typically you can always take your head to a regional office if you're close to a regional office and have it be able to be sampled there. So just something to keep in mind. Remind
people about the deer head. How many inches the neck you need to keep, or what's the guidelines?
Generally, we want about 5 or 6 inches of neck. Okay. The sample we take is actually right at the voice box. And so if you cut down below kind of where that hard nodule is, right at the back end of the jaw, that'll give us enough area to be able to get that sample out of there.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So once we get that sample, basically it's shipped overnight to a lab. We're currently using 2 labs, one here with the Department of Agriculture, the CE Cord lab, based here in Nashville, and then we're also using Mississippi State University's Veterinary Diagnostic Lab. And so the samples will be kind of parsed out depending on which direction they need to go to either one of those 2 labs. And so we're working closely with those labs. Obviously there's always going to be, it takes time at each step of that process. And so there's just an inherent amount of time that's built in depending on when you harvest your animal to the point in time that it actually makes it to the lab.
And we want to take you inside the lab to show you a little sneak peek behind the scenes.
Cord Animal Health Diagnostic Lab has been partnering with TWRA to assist with testing for CWD in herds across the state. We're collecting samples, we're receiving samples from TWRA, from hunters, from taxidermists, from deer processors, and we really work with TWRA and various other regulatory partners to prevent the spread of disease within the state. So when we receive samples from TWRA, we are going to first accession those samples, assign them a sample number so we can track its life throughout the laboratory to ensure they don't get mixed up with any other samples. Then we're going to take that tissue, we're going to chop it into small pieces, we're going to take a subsample of that tissue and begin processing it to purify it, to really extract those prion proteins or those proteins that are resistant to degradation, and then we're going to test those by ELISA before reporting those back out to our partners at TWRA. So now that you've heard a little bit about the partnership between TDA and TWRA, we'll pass it over to Jocelyn Orvetta, our supervisor of the CWD testing section, to give you an in-depth view of what happens.
With every single tissue, we pull out our lymph node with a clean set of forceps. And prions like to bind to stainless steel, so it's very, very important that we use one forcep per sample. And then so for every single sample, we're aiming for 0.18 grams to 0.22 grams. We macerate it a little bit, and then each sample gets its own. These are typically numbered, so this will be like 1 through 90 that we would assign that sample during accessioning, and then we generate this cut sheet. And so it's just like, I know that this, when I accessioned it, this sample that ends in 999 is going into tube number 1. And so for each sample, we before we start cutting, we check it against our cut list to make sure that we know for a fact tube number 1 is positive, and that means it's sample number 999. So this is our homogenizer. It's a super scientific blender. There's beads in each tube. So think of that as your blender blades. Once we put it in here and I start it, this manifold will rotate like this very, very quickly. And so those beads are in there grinding it, chewing it up your tissue. It started out as a lymphatic tissue in saline, and then it is now a tissue smoothie. I take my syringes, and these are my calibration syringes. These syringes, they're a dull needle, but the diameter of that needle is the largest particle I want in my sample. What we're doing is we're chewing up and spitting out anything that's not as strong as a prion. And so I need my particles to be small enough to where the enzyme can come in, digest it if it's not prion. And so that's why this step is completely essential. So I pull out 35 microliters of my sample. This is our NSP, and it's an automated purification system. By putting it into my deep well plate, we can process 90 samples at a time. I'm gonna put my proteinase into my proteinase tub. So I have put my reagents in there. I have my samples, I have my reagents, and this will be my final end product purified protein plate. And from there, we'll run the ELISA. In the bottom of this plate is purified prion. We have essentially layered our different reagents into our ELISA plate. It's an hour and a half later. So the yellow is positive and the clear is negative. We know by looking at this that sample 1 was positive. See, on our plate, if you compare the yellows to the red IRs, which stands for initial reactor, but you can see that it lines up with what we would expect, like all the yellow ones are positive. Yes. So all the way through, we keep all our samples. Once you are assigned number 1, you are number 1 until we're sending results to you guys.
But in general, once it gets to the lab, it's typically within a week, depending on the volume that's at the lab at that point in time, that we'll have test results back. But that could be prolonged just based on the amount of time it took to actually get that sample and then ship it to the lab and things like that.
Yeah, I know. What was it, last year, year before? There was some delays in the snow and different things that it was a heavy traffic weekend in the woods, and then weather came in and it delayed some samples getting results in. But yeah, we are, like you said, burning the roads, moving as fast as we can to get those heads or get those samples and get them shipped out.
Yeah, and also, like I mentioned, harvest information, there's nothing that'll delay sample results. Like we can't tell who this, we can't tell what, where this goes. So, that's another thing to consider. And also when somebody's, like if they submit it through a taxidermist, if they hang on to it in their freezer and, wait till, later on in the year, obviously that's going to stretch out that turnaround time. So
yeah.
And one other thing to consider too is that we make every effort to sample every animal that we get our hands on. There are going to be those animals that, for whatever reason, we couldn't get a sample out of it. Just because the sample's destroyed or it's too far gone, or for many different reasons. But in general, we try and reach out to the hunter and let them know that we did receive your animal, but we were unable to sample it, just so that they're aware of that ahead of time, so they can make their decisions based on that information.
Yeah, so make sure you go to GoOutdoorsTennessee.com and update your information. Make sure that email address is current, phone number, all that good stuff, your address, and all that's just current for many reasons, but for a big one, if you're hunting in these areas where you're getting deer tested, it's important to get those results back. I know the lab here in Nashville is fairly new, so we're glad to have that on board and been able to get some results here in the Nashville area too, right?
Yeah. Well, this will be our third season using Cord Lab, so we're glad to be able to have them and accessible, because that does help cut down on turnaround time. If you can drive it straight to a lab, it makes it a little bit easier versus having to wait for UPS or FedEx or somebody else to deliver it.
Plus, you mentioned you can't control everything, so there might be staff issues at one, or it may be just a inherently busy time of the deer season around the holidays, and having two avenues to get them tested is it's going to help us. So
yeah. Definitely. All right. Well, we've kind of talked about results. Do you want to touch on consuming the animal and things like that, and what the CDC recommends, Dan?
Yeah. So I'll first start off with, your results will be available online. As soon as we get them, it's pretty much instantaneous that, within an hour or so, they're being plugged in. So you can always actually go, and there's a place you can check online, or you can just go into your account and it'll tell you that your result's been received, or where in the process your test result actually is. You'll get one of three things this year. You'll either see that it's positive, not detected, meaning that the tissue that we looked at, it wasn't there, and then also a suspect not confirmed, which is a third category that we have this year. And we can talk about that a little bit later, but ultimately with those test results, if you have a positive animal, we're not the human health authorities, but we defer to the CDC for their recommendation. And their recommendation is still that if you are harvesting an animal in an area that's known to have CWD, get your animal tested. If that animal tests positive, don't consume meat from that animal. At this point in time, we've got that third category, suspect not confirmed. Our diagnostics are the best that we have available.
Yeah.
There can be conflicting results on diagnostics at times, and so that category basically is there. It's more of a cautionary category, and informs us if we want to do increased surveillance in an area. But for hunters, what that actually means is, you take caution when consuming meat from that animal also. Just because, we couldn't say that it was or that it wasn't necessarily in that animal. And that doesn't happen often. It's less than 1% of a time that actually occurs. But we just want people to be more aware. And that's based on new science that's come out.
Things are always changing. Tests are always improving and all that, yeah.
Exactly, yeah. And so we try and keep up to date with the new science, and we try and update our protocols accordingly, and that's what we've done this year is updated our protocols, and we want hunters to be as well informed about the test results. Keeping in mind, the tests that we do are not a food safety test.
Right.
But we, it is kind of you can use it as a guide as to, for your own personal choice as to what you want to do based on your test result.
Perfect. Good. I think that covers that. So now, Garrett, let's move into incentive programs.
Yeah, absolutely.
There are many ways we're encouraging folks to get out there and hunt, kill deer, have fun, harvest animals. Talk about some of the incentive programs around CWD and how hunters can help, or how we can help hunters if they're out there helping us.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Hunter Harvest is our primary management tool essentially for this disease, and so we developed some incentive programs that are really beneficial to the hunter. We've got the Fight CWD incentive program, which if a hunter actually does harvest a positive deer, then you're able to get a $75 voucher. processing voucher towards processing of an additional animal at some point.
Okay.
And those tags are good for, I believe it's the, Dan, can you elaborate on that, of when those vouchers are good for, the $75 tags?
They're good for the current season, and
I believe the voucher is just good for that season.
Okay, just for that season.
Yeah.
Harvesting 2 or more of those positive deer gets you a sportsman's license, an annual sportsman's license, so that's good. As we touched on already, we also have the Earn a Buck program, which, as Jeremy was mentioned earlier, previously it was 2 antlerless deer that needed to be harvested before you could harvest an additional buck. And new this year, you can actually harvest only 1 antlerless deer, which gets you that additional buck that you can harvest.
Okay.
We also have the replacement buck program, which is not just associated with the CWD zone, but also statewide. So any hunter that harvests a CWD positive animal, or CWD positive buck, is able to get a replacement buck tag, or it's not a tag, but a replacement buck that they're able to kill.
Shows up in your account, right?
Right,
Yeah.
right, absolutely. So
And we encourage folks to use that that year, or it carries over to the following, correct?
Correct. Yep.
the first buck or antlered animal that you harvest the next season counts as the replacement.
As the
buck.
replacement, yeah.
Yeah, so it's automatically removed in the system. So the joy of computerized systems nowadays, right?
Yeah.
Makes it easy.
And it's important to mention that a lot of folks have a lifetime sportsman's license, so those sportsman's license that Garrett alluded to that can be earned by harvesting 2 positives, those actually can be gifted
Okay,
to
awesome.
anybody of your choosing, as well as the processing voucher
Right.
can be gifted to somebody.
Awesome. I think that those are all great incentives to get people out there in the woods and encourage them to hunt in those units and even outside those units, like you said, with the replacement buck. One thing on the deer processing that I thought about, we partner with Hunters for the Hungry. Is that program still going on, Jeremy? Do you still see that happening?
Absolutely. They've actually, I don't know the exact numbers, but
Right.
they've actually added some partnering processors to that program the last few years. Their protocol is, Hunters for the Hungry will only distribute meat in these areas that are affected by CWD, pending not detected test results. So that works just fine with our program. We're visiting those processors anyways, so we work those samples right in, and they're tested just like the rest. So.
Yeah.
I think the other day they were telling us it's over 700 animals were donated as part of the Hunters for the Hungry program last year.
Wow.
Yeah.
So a fairly large percentage of the deer tested were okay to share. Yeah.
Yeah, there's very few that actually ended up testing positive that were donated through that program. I can't remember the exact numbers off the top of my head, but it was less than like 30. So
Wow. That's good. That's good to hear for sure. Well, I think we covered all our points. Anything that we want to drive home again, from what we've covered, remember the counties which are in the unit. Those are where the hunting regulations apply. Mm-hmm. And make sure you check your map. And I'll pull that tab back up for people who are watching. Go ahead, Dan.
One thing to emphasize is that those incentive programs, if you harvest a positive, the voucher program and the replacement buck, and those programs are actually available statewide if you harvest a positive. Mm-hmm. And so that's, basically just so that you aren't penalized if you harvest a positive animal. It gives you the opportunity to go out and then harvest another animal. Those are what those programs are designed for. So those are available regardless of what the county status is.
Okay.
Throughout the state.
And that, we're testing across the state. So if you participate in those drop-off locations or those big weekends when we're taking samples and stuff, you may very well, we hope not, but you might get a positive.
Well, and if we do get a positive somewhere like that, that incentivizes someone to go out maybe to that same county, because it's the replacement buck program is, you cash those in Unit CWD or the county that it was harvested in. So,
okay, yeah.
By some chance it's in a different region. We hope not again, but that lets you harvest an additional buck in that county as well.
Yeah, Awesome. So the replacement buck is statewide, and the earn a buck is only in Unit CWD.
That's correct.
Well, like we said, make sure you check the website, CWDintennessee.com. It's being updated all the time as things change and information comes in with new research and new things that we're doing. We're updating that, updating the maps. The hunting guide is out, and it's out there as well. So make sure you review that in the hunting seasons. Remind folks what the extensions were in Unit CWD, Jeremy, because I think that's big.
Yeah, the season is extended. The end of gun season basically runs through January 31st. So the whole month of January, you can hunt with any weapon in any Unit CWD county. And again, check the hunting guide, make sure you know where you are. So.
And muzzleloader and rifle start concurrently on muzzleloader opener and Unit CWD.
That's correct.
Okay. Awesome. Anything else we want to share? If not, I'm going to jump over here to Garrett.
I think I'm good.
Okay. So, Garrett, new to the agency.
Yeah.
We're glad you're here. Tell us a little about yourself, and we got about a minute and a half or so. Tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got here, your background. I'm sure you enjoy hunting. I guess that's why you're here, right? You're an outdoors guy.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm deer crazy. So,
Deer crazy.
Deer crazy. I grew up in Kentucky, so I'm making the trek south. I do have some family out in East Tennessee, so Tennessee's kind of like a second home to me.
There you go.
Not
Not a Wildcat fan, are you?
Man, I hate to say it. It's kind of ingrained, but
We try not to hold that against them.
yeah. No, but I've got a lot of relatives in East Tennessee, so there's some Vols
There
out
you go.
that way.
There you
so, but just finishing up school and just happy to join the agency. Everybody here's been great. Love working with these guys. So
Yeah. So, growing up in Kentucky, how's hunting different there than it is here?
I mean, the regulations are obviously a little different as you would change from state to state, but I would say the passion's pretty similar there. You know, everybody, it's a big deer state. And people love deer hunting up there just like they do down here. So
Yeah. I've got some friends that travel up that way every year to hunt. You know, I think people like to hunt across lines and visit the neighboring counties. It's not uncommon.
absolutely.
Speaking of that, there's transport restrictions across state lines too. So make sure you check that guide, check that
Absolutely.
website, and know those restrictions on transporting your harvest across state lines. So,
Absolutely.
Yep.
guys, it's been fun.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Jason.
it's always fun to have you guys in here, getting everybody up to date on CWD and everything else that's going on. So we appreciate you.
It's almost deer season, so
That's right.
ready to get out there.
Yep.
Couple of weekends away.
That's right.
Yep, right
I'm
on the
excited
corner.
about it. So as long as it'll cool off, we'll be good.
Yeah.
All right. Well, this is Tennessee Wildcast. We thank you for tuning in. Thank you for watching, for listening. Remember, tnwildlife.org is our website. GoOutdoorsTennessee.com is where you can purchase a license. Don't forget the e-store. That's shop.GoOutdoorsTennessee.com. It's swag there, hats, cups, and all kinds of fun stuff. So check that out. I guess that's it. Thank you, Todd, for running the board, making it sound good. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for tuning in. Stay connected with TWRA by visiting our website at tnwildlife.org and follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Hey, it's all about Tennessee wildlife. It's what we do. Tennessee Wildcast will be on the air again next week. We'll see you then.